Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
So, I'd like to chat about Strasbourg. I'd like to talk about the two protests that British politicians, and obviously in the case of Farage's crew, I use the word very advisedly, have done to protest. I don't think I'm being tricky. This is Wayne's idea. I think he might have a point on this. Is turning your back on the ode to joy, as they have done, as a protest against... That's the bit where I struggle. It's a protest against the Parliament they've decided to turn up at and sit down and take a salary. Wayne in Basildon, who for the very first time ever is going to be allowed to suggest a topic for conversation, he says it's no different from what Colin Kaepernick did, the American football player who refused to take the knee as a protest against discrimination against people of colour in America by the police and others. I mean, it essentially in support for the Black Lives Matter movement. And I'm not going to actually... I think it's such a good observation by Wayne. I'm not even going to tease him by saying something like, for the first time ever, he's really made me think. He's a bright lad. He's a pal of mine. Only through the programme. He's someone who's become a friend via being a listener. And he's made me really stop and think there. Because I think the Liberal Democrats have got it wrong as well by having the B word on the back of their T-shirts. There's nothing wrong with turning up at the Parliament wearing Stop Brexit on a T-shirt. But having that swear word on the back, I don't know, maybe it's just me being a little bit Victorian and clutching my pearls. But can we talk about all of it? And can I start with a deliberately provocative observation, which I completely hold to be true? People like me who can quite easily conceive of voting for the Liberal Democrats, sympathetic, particularly on their Brexit stance, I am happy and capable of criticising them. I think they shouldn't have done this. I cautiously put it to you that anyone who's voted for the so-called Brexit Party is not going to be able to do that, because that is the nature of their conditioning, is everything that they do. This is how they've ended up claiming that they voted to be poorer and for businesses to go bankrupt, and even for the United Kingdom to be broken up. They didn't vote for any of those things. But the word John in Edinburgh used, they've been so well groomed, they can never, ever, ever criticise the dear leader. So, start for 10... People that want to remain in the European Union have no problem at all criticising the Liberal Democrats' approach in Strasbourg today. People that have somehow managed to convince themselves that they want to leave the European Union with no deal, they're not able, intellectually or emotionally, to criticise their own side. They're not capable of it. They lack, I don't know what, the sentience, the intelligence, the wisdom. But maybe I wouldn't criticise them either if you can persuade me that what they've done is no different from what Colin Kaepernick did in the context of the NFL. The problem, of course, comes up when you find yourself wondering what Farage and his crew would make of Colin Kaepernick's refusal to take the knee during the national anthem at American football matches. Surely their hypocrisy, immense though it is, would not extend to condemning Colin Kaepernick for refusing to take the knee for an anthem, while themselves actually... What would happen if he turned his back on the anthem, do you think? And what do you think the kind of characters that congregate around Farage's grubby messaging would make of a black man protesting publicly against an anthem? Presumably they're all on his side, right? Yeah, right. I think the conversation about what the Liberal Democrats have done might be more interesting. 03456060973. I've also got it completely backwards, inevitably. Of course, the fact is not that he refused to take a knee, Colin Kaepernick. He did take a knee during the American national anthem before NFL games, something that has caused huge uproar and controversy in America. And my friend Wayne, a bright lad, and someone who I often turn to for counsel and advice, writes, "Soz dude, I disagree with you on the Brexit Party doing what they did. They protested against something they disagreed with, peacefully and democratically. To ridicule the protest based on your belief, that's the same as Trump versus Kaepernick. Don't go to that level." I'm not sure I agree with Wayne on this, but it's a really interesting point. 03456060973. Of course, it's a point that comes under strain somewhat if it were to turn out that the kind of people who've congregated around Farage's grubby messaging actually object to Colin Kaepernick taking the knee during the national anthem, because that would be hypocrisy on an epic scale. So we'll find out about that. But I mean, what's caused more upset on Twitter this morning for me is the suggestion that the Liberal Democrats got it wrong by having a rude word on the back of their T-shirts. The idea, for me, I tell you why it is. It's a word that rhymes with Rollocks to Brexit. And very, very simply, that's not a word I say in front of my children. OK? And it's also not a word I'm going to say on air. I don't know whether is it on the prescribed list. I don't know how offensive it is. I think there's gradations of offensiveness. But in context, I could say it. There are words I probably couldn't say in any context whatsoever. But I'm not going to, because you might have kids in the car. It's not a particularly dirty word, but it's not a word I would say in front of my children. And that alone is the reason why I don't think the Liberal Democrat MEPs should be marching around Strasbourg with it on the back of their T-shirts. So pick on either of those, or pick on my suggestion that it's perfectly possible for sensible thinking people like me to criticise the actions of politicians who I agree with on the big question of Brexit. I suspect that if you're on the other side of the Brexit divide, you can't criticise your lot because you're actually not capable of doing so. But I'd love to be proved wrong, in which case you need to tell me why you think they got this. As a staunch Brexiter, you think that Farage and his crew have got this one horribly wrong because... 11:52 is the time. Joe is in Stockport. Joe, what do you reckon?
Yeah, hi, James. I think that there is a distinct difference. I mean, I think you were spot on, really, before when you mentioned about the MEPs. They've actually been paid to attend,
yes.
And they could have quite easily just said, right, I'm going to boycott it, I'm not going to go, rather than this sort of childish sort of behaviour where they're actually hypocrisy. They're actually taking the money, but sort of throwing the dummies out of the pram. I think it
is a bit having your cake and eating it, in other words. Either you object to it by not turning up.
They don't mind being paid.
Yeah.
They don't mind being paid by the European money, but they're there to sort of disrespect the process. And I think where the American chap who refused to go, or he refused to go on his knee, I can't remember which.
No, he did go on his knee. He refused to stand. He's supposed to stand up. Yes.
Yeah, but he's not actually being paid by the White House, so he's making a protest in support of the Black Lives That Matter. And I think the two things are very different.
Do you know something, Joe? This is a brilliant topic, because if I end up getting my backside spanked all over the studio, I can blame it all on Wayne. It's not my idea. It's his idea. He's the one that said it's just like Colin Kaepernick. I thought it was temporarily an impressive observation, but I've got no loyalty to it. I'll be happy to throw it under a bus at the first opportunity and chalk it up as absolute abject idiocy.
Yeah, but I think that guy showed integrity.
Yeah, well, I do as well. But the suggestion from Wayne in Basildon was that they were also showing a form of integrity as well. And you quite rightly point out, you don't really get to turn your nose up at something while taking money out of it. You can't do both at the same time.
Send the money back, donate it to charity, do something else with it, but don't take it and then also disrespect the process.
And the Liberal Democrats?
It would have been much more powerful if they hadn't gone. The Liberal Democrats, I think it's just slogan politics, James, to be honest.
Yeah, it is slogan politics. I'm not going to argue with that, but should that slogan have appeared on those T-shirts in that context?
I don't think it gets the message across, does it?
No, I don't think it does.
It's not the best way of representing yourself as a party, because you're almost sort of joining the classroom and the playground sort of mentality. I mean, we've got enough of that with Boris Johnson, but
we've got plenty of that.
I don't think that was a wise thing to do. But I think the Liberal Democrats, I mean, let's face it, they need friends, don't they?
And they need attention, actually, and quite a few people. Andrew Betts puts it best. He says it's not classy, but the other side is not being classy, and ultimately it's a battle of volume. And so, I might have been talking exclusively about the Herberts turning their back on the music if it wasn't for the fact that we can also talk about the Liberal Democrat, in my view, Herberts, wearing rude words on their T-shirt. So it's a win. And Steve Parks, replying to Andrew Betts, has tweeted, having tested this with my European friends, it actually plays very well. Very British humour. This is what we love about the UK. I'm still persuaded that it's a misjudgment on the part of the Liberal Democrats, but we will, as ever on the programme, reflect all positions. Thank you, Joe. Tommy's in Dublin. Tommy, what would you like to say?
Yeah, James, I was just saying to your researcher there, I wonder if you look through the kind of social media feeds and Twitter feeds of, say, Brexit supporting, say, people who support that stance that Nigel Farage did. And if you look through their feed, say, of Sunderland fans or West Bromwich Albion fans, would they have the same respect for James McClain?
James McClain, I know where you're going with this, of course.
You know, he turned his back, or didn't turn to the flag, I think it was. He refuses to wear a poppy because of his culture and where he grew up and his political ideals.
Grew up in Derry, didn't he?
Yes, he did, and he had families involved, family members and friends involved in the Bloody Sunday massacre, as far as I'm aware as well.
Yes.
And neighbours, if nothing else. But
and so he registers his peaceful, silent protest in response to an anthem. And you're right, presumably...
He refused to wear the poppy. He didn't stand to attention. He stood, he was respected, but I think the rest of the players turned to the Union Jack that was flying, and he refused to do it. And he's absolutely, assassinated from the stands.
He got crucified and everything. It was on Remembrance Day, wasn't it? I'm not familiar with the bit about the anthem. I'll take your word for that, because you're a bit more clued up than I am. But I remember
it made the news over here. I think it was a friendly match somewhere. It wasn't. I don't think it was. But they played the anthems of the two clubs. I think it was while he was playing with West Brom. I think he still might be playing there. I'm not sure. But
it doesn't matter, because the poppy is another thing that these people like to sort of gather around and use as a symbol for their own worldview. And for James McClain, it commemorates British soldiers killed on the battlefields of Northern Europe, and subsequent then from 19 all British soldiers. And he feels that he doesn't want to... it's not a violent protest or an obnoxious protest.
On that point, a lot of Irish people don't wear the poppy. Even though, loads of Irish served in World War One, but I think it was around the time where the British Legion made it as a symbol for all soldiers who fell during all wars. And, of course, the wars in Ireland were wars of conquest.
And he grew up on the Cregan estate. I thought he had. I was just double checking. So I mean that it's impossible not to be deeply enmeshed in the Bloody Sunday scandal and massacre as a result of that. And I've got some words that he said. Actually, people say I'm being disrespectful, but don't ask why I choose not to wear it. If the poppy was simply about World War I and II victims alone, I'd wear it without a problem. I would wear it every day of the year if that was the thing, but it doesn't. It stands for all the conflicts that Britain has been involved in. Because of the history where I come from in Derry, I cannot wear something that represents that. And it might well be that the Brexit Party is full of people that respect James McClain's wishes and decision on that, Tommy. But you, like me,
I would love to think so.
Yeah, I would love to think so as well, Tommy.
Are of a different opinion that...
We shall find out.
I doubt it.
And similarly, I bet the Brexit Party is riddled with people that are on Colin Kaepernick's side in his ongoing battle with Donald Trump, because that would involve consistency, moral probity, and a degree of honesty and integrity. And they are, those are bywords for that kind of politics. Tommy, thank you very much. We'll crack on with this, actually. I enjoy it. And I do wonder about the Liberal Democrat thing as well. I just... agree with them completely, of course, about the need to call off Brexit. I think we're probably on a losing wicket. But you don't stop doing what you believe to be right just because you're going to lose. In fact, you could argue that integrity demands you redouble your efforts. As Orwell famously observed, there is truth and there is untruth. And as long as you cling to truth, even if you're the only one, then you shall not go mad. I feel I'm testing that theory. 3 minutes after 12 is the time. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Oh, man alive. What would you think if you were a French citizen, relatively moderate? Not. I don't mean right-wing or left-wing. I just mean not mad. Not an extremist. Not someone who thinks that, the world is all going to end. And you'd be looking at the pictures in Strasbourg today. Presumably they're not going to be widely reported elsewhere in Europe. But we've sent a bunch of people over there, democratically elected by the population of this country, but not democratically put in positions of candidates. I don't even know what the selection process is to be a Brexit Party candidate. Do you just get sort of, I don't know, actually, what is the selection process to be a Brexit Party candidate? It's not really a party in any meaningful sense. How do you change the leader, for example? Because I know Farage is all about democracy. He never shuts up about it when he's not complaining about jokes. So what's the democratic process for changing the leader of the so-called Brexit Party? Does anyone know? All right, that's too tough. How about becoming a candidate? Who decides who can become a candidate? Is there any democratic accountability? Usually it's the constituency parties that choose candidates, right? I think he said he's going to put candidates in every constituency, but they don't have any constituency parties. So it's almost like it's not at all democratic in any way, which would be odd. But that's not what we're talking about today. We're talking about the wisdom or otherwise of turning your back on music. See, Colin Kaepernick, the NFL player, goes down on one knee when the national anthem is playing as a sort of protest against or sign of support for Black Lives Matter and a protest against police brutality against people of colour. Racists pretend not to understand what Black Lives Matter means. They pretend to think it means Black Lives Matter and white lives don't. What it means, obviously, and they all know this, but it's important with these people to call out their deceptions and cons all the time. Otherwise, we know that they gain hold on more credulous people, less robust minds. It means black lives should matter as much as white lives. Okay? I know it's a statement of the bleeding obvious, but these people pretend not to understand it in the hope of winning the support of people who are too thick to understand it. And so, we're here to help the thick. It's kind of, might have that put on my business card or mission statement. So Colin Kaepernick goes down on one knee when the American national anthem is playing as a sign of support, actually, for his fellow citizens. What are the Brexit Party protesting against when they turn their back on Beethoven? Well, they're protesting against the parliament that they're in and drawing salaries from, while not actually doing anything to represent the interests of their constituents. It's a bit like Farage claiming to care about the fishing industry and only turning up for 1 or 2 meetings out of 30 or so that he could have gone to as a member of the relevant committee. I don't get it. I don't get it. And the oddest thing about these people is that they seem to be really, really proud of having been elected MEPs, almost as if it's the only meaningful achievement many of them have made in their lives. I don't mean Widdicombe, obviously. She was a proper MP in a parliament where she wanted to change legislation. When I say proper MP, I'm not maligning Strasbourg. I'm saying a proper politician in the sense that she sought to influence policy and legislation. They're not there to influence policy or legislation. They kind of pat themselves on the back for deliberately not trying to improve the laws that are being passed in the parliament. So, I don't get it. I mean, I know it gets coverage on the news, and I know we've all fallen into the trap of talking about it, and it's not even a criticism. I think we kind of have to. But what is it a protest against? Because if you want to protest against a parliament, do what Sinn Féin do, and don't turn up. That's the parallel, isn't it? Not Colin Kaepernick. So Sinn Féin, love them or loathe them or neither, don't take their seats in Westminster because they protest and object to the primacy of Westminster over their territory, in this case Northern Ireland. Back to Northern Ireland again. So Sinn Féin, I don't know if they draw their salaries or not. If they do, then I'm afraid they're hypocrites as well. But this lot are there. They're sitting in the Parliament protesting about the Parliament. And it's just stupid. Martin's in Gosport. Martin, what's going on?
Hello, James. Good afternoon. I'm a staunch Brexiteer. But
You're not allowed to use that word. Not allowed to use that word. Brexiter.
Okay,
yes.
I'm Brexiter.
Yes.
I'm at a loss as to what the point of this protest is.
Well, it gets them on the news. So, I mean,
Yeah, but for all the wrong reasons, and it reveals their contempt when what they should be doing is keeping their powder dry, ready to do whatever they can to get us a successful exit. And that's what they've not done. Your rhetoric earlier on this morning has tried to suggest that you can pigeonhole us all, and I don't think you can, mate. Well,
I probably can. I don't know that I want to, but I probably could.
That seems to be what you're trying to do.
Well, okay, I will then. What does a good exit look like?
Well, it would look like a better negotiation from a stronger standpoint.
What do you mean a stronger standpoint?
Well, if the spectre of a no-deal Brexit is there, then at least they know what the outcome can be.
You mean the no-deal Brexit they published 80 documents describing their preparations for over a year ago?
And all that.
But
time,
no, but is that what you mean? Is
that exactly that?
Right. So the one that all the ports in Holland are already ready for.
And why aren't we? Why are we not ready for it as well? And the reason we're not ready for it is because our leaders weren't up with the idea in the first place.
Yes, but I've just explained to you. I've just explained to you how the other side, if you want to think of it in those terms, are prepared for it, and they have taken the threat seriously, and
we've been seriously let down by our government.
So our stronger standpoint would be to threaten to blow our brains out and really, really do it.
Well, obviously, you're far more informed about these things because you've got
there's the pigeonhole, and there's the pigeonhole, Martin. There's the pigeonhole you object to me putting you into. Someone whose opinions are based on, within 30 seconds of questioning, an admission that you don't actually have the facts in front of you.
Okay, James.
And I didn't want to do that. Why'd you make me do this, Martin? We were getting on so well. No, you said I was pigeonholing people. It isn't, mate. You make it so easy for me.
James, it's to do that.
But why'd you do it? Why'd you ring me up and say that? Why would you ring up and say you pigeonhole everybody and then say I don't really understand why I hold the opinion that I hold?
James, let me finish.
Of course I will, Martin.
Thank you. I rang you up to say that Farage is a fool for doing what he's done.
Yeah.
And because it's a pointless protest. It means nothing. All it has done is reveal their contempt.
Yeah.
And it's revealed... it's
revealed them for what they are, and it's revealed Brexit for the nonsense that everybody informed knows it to be. But you object to that description.
Look, I grew up in an agricultural society or agricultural area of Norfolk.
Yes.
From the 70s, farmers were paid not to produce, or they were told to reduce their dairy herds. All these restrictions were put in place to favour the French agricultural economy.
Okay, so...
And so far, and the other restrictions favour the German industrial economy.
What restrictions are those?
You're not going to get chapter and verse.
So just give me the skeletons. Give me the bare bones of these restrictions that have been put in place to favour the French and German agricultural sectors to the detriment of the British. Give me anything you got, Martin. Let's do it now.
Well, can you explain to me?
No. You give
James,
me.
I don't have those details.
But you're on national radio.
Yes, but...
Claiming that it's been in place for 50 years, Martin. 50 years. So give me an example. Give me an example.
It's clear as the nose in your face.
Give me an example.
That British industry has reduced.
Give me an example of what you just described. French and German agriculture putting in place, or the European Union putting in place schemes designed to favour French and German agriculture to the detriment of British agriculture for 50 years. Martin's best example of that coming up now.
Price fixing of agricultural products, food. It's been happening.
So there's different prices for French and British food.
They've managed to make it so that the French farmers can sell and we've stopped producing.
Martin, mate.
That's what's happened.
Mate.
And that's what I want
what's
to see.
The restriction, Martin? What's the restriction?
Well,
the restrictions that have been in place for 50 years, describe them to me.
I haven't got them. I haven't spent the time looking at them, but I can see...
Crikey. You complain about being pigeonholed and then you just tattoo... fool across your forehead. Louise is in Fulham. Louise, what would you like to say?
Wow. Well, that's quite a scary discussion to come in after. I want to defend the Liberal Democrats and what they did in Strasbourg. But first of all, I really like the analogy that was done between the Black Right and the two protests today. But I think the difference is...
Let's not get carried away. I think it's rubbish.
No, I do like it. But I think where it doesn't work is that the man who was protesting in favour of black rights, when the national anthem came on, was not saying, I'm against America.
No.
Whereas...
He went down on one knee. You could say it's more on... Well, anyway.
Well, then there's a body language thing as well. Whereas the Brexit Party, they are literally protesting against the EU and against the European Parliament and all its institutions. So they were protesting against the very people who were watching them. That's the first thing.
It's bizarre, isn't it?
Well, that's another issue. They've got every right to make their point. I don't agree with how they made it. But then the other thing is the body language. I mean, you just mentioned the black rights. It was getting down on one knee. It was facing your audience. There's something quite respectful about that.
Yes.
Whereas turning your backs to everyone with your arms crossed, that's quite aggressive body language. And that takes me on to the Liberal Democrats. So I vote Lib Dem, but I am actually one of those people who are quite happy to criticise them. So, for example, when the Lib Dems were attacking, some of them were attacking Change UK, I was first one to get out there and say, stop doing that, it's not cool, Remain parties need to stick together. But having said that, I wouldn't really criticise them for what they did today, because, again...
Would you use that word in front of children?
Well, I actually do, but it's probably not a good thing.
There you go, Martin. That's how easy it is to get one over on me. You just have to admit to swearing in front of your children. Now, Keith, get me social services on line 2.
I'm not really the ideal parent in that sense. But having said that, the body language of the MEPs, and I get that, they're the Lib Dem MEPs, I get that they're Remainers and that, the Brexit Party aren't.
They're warm and happy and generous-spirited, and they're marching through the corridors, giggling and smiling and laughing. Actually, are we going to dump that or not? We've done that. So Louise, for the avoidance of doubt, just use the word that has appeared on the back of Liberal Democrats T-shirts in Strasbourg today, and Keith took an executive decision to dump it, because we didn't give a fair warning. I heard Nick Ferrari dancing around it the other day. That's all right. I mean, it highlights the point. You're saying that they should have on the back of their T-shirts a word that you've just been dumped from national radio for saying out loud.
Well, that's not because I agree that national radio should be censoring.
Yeah, but it's standards. It's manners, Louise. It's political correctness gone mad.
Well, but that brings me on to my next point.
Blimey.
There's something about that word, the B word, that is not aggressive.
No, it's delightfully Anglo-Saxon, and you can really kind of...
It is.
It's got a lovely plosive on it. You can really deliver it with a boom and a...
I think you can.
Bada bing, but I still don't like it in this context. I mean, it's not as bad. Oh, Lord above, is this true? What? Oh, I wonder if he realised. Guess what happened in 1926 in the Reichstag, Louise?
I don't know. Someone used a B word in German.
No, it's a little bit worse than that. A political party that was still relatively nascent in 1926 turned its back on the Speaker of the Reichstag. Do you know what that political party was?
I can hazard a guess. Go on.
It was the Nazi Party.
Mm.
It's 12:17. Okay, I've got to go. That's an astonishing picture from the Reichstag in 1926 when the Nazi Party turned their back upon the Speaker. And in Strasbourg Parliament today, Nigel Farage's party turned their backs upon Ode to Joy, the anthem. Wayne in Basildon, a great friend of the programme, has suggested that they have done nothing worse, or indeed something as admirable as what the American football player Colin Kaepernick has done in the context of his support for the Black Lives Matter movement. I think it's fair to say not a single caller has agreed with Wayne yet, although when I read the tweet out, I thought it made quite a pertinent point. And then the Liberal Democrats have got a rude word on the back of their T-shirts in Strasbourg today, a word which apparently we are allowed to broadcast. So I need to apologise both to Louise and to my producer for dumping that word. It is within the bounds of acceptability in the context of broadcasting live news stories, but I would still, because I wouldn't say it in front of my children, and I'd be cross with the radio station that did, I'd still rather not hear it uttered again down the phone line. David is in Carnarvon. David, what would you like to say?
Hello, James. Good afternoon.
Hello,
another nice, calm and relaxing show.
What was he on, that fella, banging on about flipping farms and stuff? I do wonder sometimes why I bother anymore. 50 years he's had to come up with an example of the things he described, and he couldn't come up with one. But anyway, carry on.
I do think if you're going to phone up, you do need to know your arguments.
Just one example. One example. Yeah. Oh dear.
Well,
anyway.
Well, okay. Well, what I was ringing up about is the difference, and I totally support the American football player to do what he did, but I think one of the things which is different, and people will point out with that, is the fact that when he bent his knee and all that, it was the American national anthem, his own country's national anthem, and when Farage turned his back, it was the national anthem of the EU.
Well, it's not national. It's just it's an anthem.
Yeah, it's an anthem, but it's off the EU, which basically we had a referendum to reject, and by going there, you notice that when Sinn Féin actually,
it's the EU Parliament that he's in.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Yeah.
But he did actually say, you see, the problem with Sinn Féin is Sinn Féin they don't turn up. But to be honest, a lot of the time, Sinn Féin get forgotten about. Whereas Farage did actually say when he got elected...
I don't dispute it's a publicity stunt, a successful publicity stunt. Otherwise, you and me wouldn't be talking about it. But in terms of principles and integrity, not turning up at the Parliament you reject the primacy of is a lot more impressive than turning up, pocketing the money, claiming your lunch on expenses, and then turning your back on some music.
But I have to say that in a way, I agree with his strategy. I think because he did say that he would he would cause so much disruption that the EU would want to get rid of us, and obviously it costs money. And why not accept their money? Because their money comes from us.
And we could say that about Sinn Féin as well.
Yeah, but Sinn Féin basically.
But why can't you just say they're the same?
Turn up. Well, because Sinn Féin don't turn up and they get forgotten about. Farage...
No, but again, we're back to the publicity standpoint. So you support Farage and you support Sinn Féin. That's quite a position to find yourself in at 23 minutes after 12 on a Tuesday.
I don't support Sinn Féin.
Of course you do.
I don't support Sinn Féin. No, I don't.
Of course, because they're objecting to the Parliament by doing what they do.
No, they can do what they want, but they get forgotten about, whereas Farage he's got the headlines.
Listen, it's a publicity stunt. As a publicity stunt, it's successful, but we're not talking about the success or otherwise of the publicity stunt. We're talking about the moral content of the action. And Sinn Féin are more moral, because they don't take the money. I don't think they do, but they don't take the seat.
Because you're talking about it, well, first of all, it's our money, and secondly, you're talking about it from
so's the Sinn Féin thing, isn't it? I don't actually know, for the record, whether they take the money or not, but they don't take their seats. So they're morally equivalent actions in your mind, which means if you support one, you have to support the other.
But you're talking about it from an EU perspective, whether it's moral to take their money.
I'm talking from Leicester Square perspective.
Well, in that case, I'm talking about it from a British perspective. I'm quite happy that them taking the money and turning their back on them.
I know you are.
Their money.
Of course you are.
Use every sort of...
But you can be... I'm not asking whether you're happy about it. I'm asking for you to justify the integrity of the action, and you can't, because all you've got is that it's...
I just have.
No, you haven't. You said it was a successful publicity stunt.
No, I also said it's justifiable as a British person who voted Brexit to use the money, which is originally our money, we made a contribution to it, to use the money to basically disrupt their parliament.
But as long as we remain members, disrupting their parliament is disrupting our situation. Once we've left...
Exactly, so let's get out.
Well, exactly my point. Get out.
Yeah.
But you rang in to say they should be in. Make your mind up, David. Do you want them in or do you want them out?
Get out of the EU.
Well, that's happening at the end of October.
Yeah, well...
So what are they doing in Parliament today?
Well, touch wood.
Trying to get some attention and to get cheers and applause from people like you, so it's mission accomplished.
Until you actually leave, you might as well disrupt the place.
But why?
Because
they want to get on with the business. They want to get on with the business of governing.
Right, because then you're sending a signal that people now are very angry and they want to get out
come
of the
off
EU.
it. Do you think people don't know that?
Well, let's keep the pressure up. Let's keep telling them every single day.
Right.
Every single day.
So you think that Brexit is now something that the European Parliament decides when or whether it happens?
No. But
so why are they doing this in the European Parliament then?
If we didn't do things like this, if we didn't make stands and we didn't have publicity and that, why does anybody ever protest? What's the point of it?
Well, I think the vote 3 years ago came... Do they always turn their back on the anthem? Did UKIP used to do that?
Well, Plaid Cymru have done things like that where they walked out.
But did UKIP used to do that? Because the vote's already happened. So this is... I think we're actually agreeing with each other. They shouldn't be in there, and this is just for publicity, which is, in the context of how it makes us look to the rest of the world, just embarrassing. Melissa is in Edinburgh. Melissa, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. I'm just phoning to kind of defend the Lib Dems with their kind of, I suppose, silliness today. I just feel like, I think it was kind of tongue-in-cheek. It's very British.
Would you use that word in front of children?
Yeah, probably, maybe.
Obviously, I'm a Victorian dad, aren't I?
I just feel that it kind of challenges the perception that liberal lefties are all just goody two-shoes and that, we're incapable. I think it kind of gives that sort of bit of oomph and kind of, the populists are getting away with so much and they're behaving so badly, but their popularity is increasing as a result because they're sort of seen to be injecting a bit of kind of personality and a bit of, challenge to the stereotype sort of thing. And I think the Lib Dems, it's a bit silly, it's a bit, it's a bit naughty, but it's. I think that's what we need. We need that kind of bit of challenge from the left.
And it's worked up to a point, although it's not garnered anywhere near as much attention as the Brexit Party aping the Nazi Party in 1926 in the Reichstag.
Yeah, and I think, like you said earlier, you made the point that it's, as it was, if the Lib Dems hadn't done what they've done, the only story today would be the Brexit Party turned their backs. As it is, it's sort of...
Well, I think it's only going to be on this show. I think it's only on this show that it's going to get diluted by a little bit of Liberal Democrat T-shirt action.
Yeah, but anything.
I think UKIP used to do it. That's another reason why I don't understand necessarily the level of attention that's being achieved. And as Am Incorrigible points out, the Brexit Party MEPs actually represent millions of Britons, most of whom didn't vote for them. They represent me. They are the British representatives in the European Parliament. So that's problematical as well under David's analysis. On whose behalf did they disrespect the EU organisation today? In the same way that if you've got a Labour MP but you are a Conservative, the Labour MP is your representative in Parliament. 29 minutes after 12, a little bit more on this. I hate radio phone-ins that address the question of whether or not we should be talking about something. It's a bit like when a picture gets published and you say, go to the website and have a look at the picture and tell us whether you think it should have been published. But it does make a sort of sense. Have we fallen into a trap today? You've got all sorts of terrible things unfolding in Hong Kong. You've got this hustings in Northern Ireland where it seems increasingly clear that the sanctity of the Union is under mortal threat. You've got the ramifications of that. You've got Jeremy Hunt conceding yesterday that the fishing industry, under his analysis, is going to need a bailout after Brexit. You've got Philip Hammond telling them both that there isn't any money. And we're talking about people turning their back on some music. It's 12:30. This is interesting. Who do you think said this? We enter the Parliament to arm ourselves with democracy's weapons. If democracy is foolish enough to give us free railway passes and salaries, that is its problem. It does not concern us. You think, because I'm talking, if you're just tuning in, about the so-called Brexit Party's decision to turn their back on the anthem in the European Parliament today in Strasbourg, while continuing to draw down salaries and accept all the allowances and all the expenses that come with the job. So who do you think said, we enter the Parliament to arm ourselves with democracy's weapons. If democracy is foolish enough to give us free railway passes and salaries, that is its problem. It does not concern us. I'll tell you a little later, but you might be able to work it out yourself. 36 minutes after 12. Jack's in Beckenham. Jack, what do you reckon?
I don't pretend to know a lot about politics, and I never have done. But
I'm particularly interested in your take in that case, genuinely.
Well, my take on it would be, and everything I see of Nigel Farage and the Brexit Party, is they thrive on controversy.
Yeah.
He's done it to be controversial, and all these people who are into the Brexit Party are going to get riled up, and they'll love it that he's done that, because it shows he's doing something.
That'll show him. Show him what? Don't know. Our backs.
Well,
but
that's the thing.
Lols.
He doesn't even know what he's protesting, but he just knows that he'll get everyone riled up, get those people who absolutely love it behind him more and more. And he's just doing it to be controversial because he enjoys it.
Do they swear an oath of allegiance, I wonder? Because I'm pretty sure, I've tried to dig into it, and a couple of people have sent me information, that Sinn Féin MPs who don't take their seats in Westminster refuse to swear the oath of allegiance, and as a result of that, they are not entitled to draw the backbencher's salary or pension. They can claim allowances for staff, officers and travel, but I don't think they do. Do you swear? I wonder whether MEPs... I'm not asking you, Jack, because the first thing you said when you came on is that you don't know a lot about politics, so if you can answer the question of whether or not MEPs swear any oath of allegiance, I'd be very, very surprised. But yeah, it just looks pathetic, right? But that works. Yeah, this is the point the other fella, David, was making. Farage's tactics work. They might be pathetic, attention-seeking tantrums, but they work.
Well, exactly, and it was all, and as again someone who isn't hugely into their politics, but when the whole Remain and Leave and the referendum vote was going on, it felt like the Leave Party just got everyone riled up behind, misconceptions and, ideas of, the grass is greener on the other side.
No, you've not been paying attention. They voted for a sort of muddy wasteland. They didn't vote for the grass. They said at the time they were voting because the grass was greener, but now they're absolutely insistent that it was a slurry-filled pit that they voted for, and they knew all along that that's what they were getting.
And that's exactly what they try and do, isn't it? And that's what I mean. He thrives on that controversy. It doesn't matter if he goes back on anything that he's saying, because the people who love him will always be behind him, because he does these things like turning his back when he's in a parliament that he's been voted into and is most likely drawing a salary from.
We enter the Reichstag to arm ourselves with democracy's weapons. Jack, good call. I've just translated one word in that observation before revealing to you who it was that said we enter the Parliament to arm ourselves with democracy's weapons. If democracy is foolish enough to give us free railway passes and salaries, that is its problem. Caroline is in, it's a new one on me, Edisbury.
Hi, yeah, Edisbury is a constituency in Cheshire.
Oh, I thought I knew Cheshire. I've never heard of Edisbury. Where's it near?
It's south and southeast of Chester.
Okay.
So basically my point was about the Lib Dems wearing those T-shirts.
Yes.
I've got to admit I'm not in favour because of that word that we don't want to say on air.
Yes.
I'm part of the constituency pro-EU group, and we don't tend to give out those stickers either because there are lots of kids at the stalls.
Yes, but we've spoken to two. Well, Louise in Fulham was definitely a mum. She's got no problem with that word in front of her children. Others have got it stuck on their fridge and they've told their children it's a naughty word, but a couple of my messages have said that's a way of expressing to them how serious this is, because we don't normally use words like that.
But it's an exceptional word. My 9-year-old came on the march with me. I gave her a dispensation to say it that day. and she's stuck by it. She's very obedient. She's stuck by that dispensation.
Yes.
But also, I was lucky enough to visit the Strasbourg Parliament a couple of months ago with Edisbury for Europe.
Yes.
And one of our group was actually stripped of her T-shirt, which said "Cancel Brexit," because you're not allowed to be politically overt when you go in there and wear statements like that.
As visitors, I presume that the politicians abide by different rules, otherwise they never would have got past security in these. But that again seems a little odd.
Yes, exactly. Having one rule for visitors, one rule for the politicians. Personally, I don't think it's great to be presenting yourself with that word, because we want to be presenting ourselves to the whole of society.
You're in a minority.
We're doing this for the future.
You're in a minority. Most people are on side, and most people on your side of this argument are on side as well. I presume people who are comfortable with the back turning will pretend to be outraged by the same way they're sort of outraged by jokes by Joe Brand. But you're in a minority. Most of your lot, or our lot, are comfortable with this word. You and me are the only. Maybe we're just Victorian in our outlook, Caroline.
No, I use the word freely. I use worse words freely, but just not in young company and not where we're wanting to appeal to a broad section of the population.
I think we're in exact agreement then, because I use all sorts of vile language on a regular basis, but not on the radio and not in front of my children or anybody else's children.
I come from the city centre of Birmingham. Of course I use other language, but yeah, you use it appropriately for your audience.
I would have, and they would argue back that this is appropriate for their audience, and there won't be many children watching the European Parliament proceedings. 12:41 is the time. Wayne has had a bit of a nightmare. I'm not going to lie to you. He sent me the tweet comparing the so-called Brexit Party to Colin Kaepernick, the Black Lives Matter campaigner and American football player, and then he's been on a job all morning. He got out of the van. He's been doing some of the environmental installations that he undertakes. And now he's got back in the van, checked his Twitter account, and he's getting a right old coating from all corners, including live on LBC at the moment. You plum. Honestly, it's nothing like the Colin Kaepernick protest. A good job I blame this one on you, otherwise it would be me that ended up looking like a mug. But it is actually his birthday, so I'm going to stop insulting him now and say happy birthday, old mate. 12:42 is the time. Tim's in Leatherhead. Tim, what would you like to say?
Good morning, James. I need some therapy. I need some help this morning.
You're get it from me, mate. I've got
absolutely spitting feathers.
Nails.
When are these morons, complete and utter morons, going to get a grip on this thing? You got the guy, the Liverpudlian guy. We've got to get out. We've got to get out. Yeah. Why? What was so wrong with life 4 years ago, 3.5 years ago?
It's
that
a
we've got to get out?
dictatorship.
What are we trying to get out of?
It's a dictatorship.
Oh, absolutely. Of course it is.
Imagine what would happen in a dictatorship if you turned your back on the anthem.
We got Martin in Norfolk talking twaddle.
He was in Gosport. He was in Gosport. He grew up in Norfolk.
No. Martin, the farmer.
He grew up in Norfolk, but he's in Gosport now, yeah.
Talking twaddle.
Yeah, I know.
The first influence... I used to be a dairy farmer in Germany.
Ah.
I know.
You may know what you're talking about in that case. You may know of what you speak.
There was no introduction, no interference from the EU. The UK gets a better deal out of agriculture than anybody else does.
Really?
He's talking twaddle, but people have been listening to this for 3 years.
50 years, mate. He said it started in 1975.
Rubbish. Milk quotas started in 1984.
And why are they beneficial to Britain? Because I have to say I was labouring under the illusion that perhaps we got the dirty end of the stick.
The UK, as with fish quotas,
yes,
we were allowed to sell them. We were allowed to trade them.
Yes, we were.
Within the country. And the French and the Germans and the Austrians weren't. So a lot of dairy farmers in the UK, they were given per cow, roughly, 10,000 litres of milk quota. And they sold it at 50p a litre. They made a fortune out of it. And then they complain that the EU has done them down and put them out of business. It's the same with the fish quotas. The UK were allowed to trade the fish quotas and other countries weren't. The fish quotas have therefore all ended up in the hands of 4 or 5 very, very wealthy families, all in the Sunday Times rich list. And then we sit around complaining. But these people have been listening to this information for 3 years.
I know, but it's information. I don't know if you're telling the truth or not. I've got no reason to doubt you, but I do know what Minette Batters, it's one of my favourite names in public life, Minette Batters said yesterday about a no-deal Brexit. Do you know what Minette Batters said yesterday about a no-deal Brexit?
I can only imagine.
No, you're going to like it.
Oh.
She's the head of the National Farmers Union.
I know she is.
And she said it remains the case it would be simply catastrophic for British food and farming.
Yeah, exactly. But something like 70% of farmers voted leave.
I know they did.
Because they are so
stupid.
Complete and utter morons.
Carry on. I mean, stop.
I run a business. No, I can't stop. I'm sorry. I've got to let this...
No, seriously, you go.
I run a business now in renewable energy.
Yes.
We export, we manufacture in the UK smart electronics for solar power. We had to stop exporting in mid-February because we didn't know, with the deadline of the 31st of March, we didn't know when we put stuff in a container in Southampton, we didn't know what it was going to be worth when it arrived in Africa or India, wherever it was going. Yeah. So we stopped exporting. My overdraft went up £180,000 during that period. And now we're looking at doing exactly the same thing again. I've just got my overdraft back under control where it was.
Good.
It's now going to do the same thing again in October, on the 31st of October. And I've just got to say, please, guys, why? What is the benefit? Why are we doing this? And I've just lost it today.
I don't blame
you,
mate.
I've been listening in the queue to you for half an hour, and I've hung up twice because I just couldn't cope anymore.
I hear you. I do.
And why? The only people who are going to suffer from it is people losing their jobs.
Of course.
My company overdraft is secured on my house and my pension. And Jeremy Hunt says it's okay if a few businesses go bust.
He'll do it with a heavy heart, Tim. A heavy heart.
Why?
I don't know, Tim. I've been asking for 3 years and I still don't know.
I'm not going to be polite anymore, I'm sorry. We're supposed to be building bridges, but how do you build bridges with complete and utter morons like that?
I don't know.
Complete and utter morons.
Say it again.
Complete and utter morons.
You know I'm here.
A lot of them.
And
a lot of them.
You've got a platform whenever you want it, Tim.
Thank you very much, James. A wonderful show. And I mean, what would we do without people like you?
Well,
some of your colleagues just listen to this sort of stuff and they brush it off. They'll take information from people who say the dairy farms have been put out of business in 1972 and not one person queries it. They just let it go. Of course, the morons absorb it like a sponge and then spout it out the next time.
And then wonder why they end up soiling themselves live on national radio for repeating something that they've heard other people say in slightly less accommodating environments. Tim, I genuinely, this is a figure of speech, but I do feel your pain. And your pain is why I do what I do. I think I'm going to be fine. I won't be affected in anything like the way that you will be. And I'm not even putting you at the top of the list of the people I care about. I'm putting the people who work on your production lines or the people that deliver your goods, people with ordinary jobs who have been told to do this by, and I'm going to run with your description, the complete morons. Boris Johnson and Jeremy Hunt are the latest Conservative hustings, hosted, of course, by your friend and mine, Ian Dale, in Northern Ireland, which arguably is the most important, geographically speaking, the most important location in which, A, they will conduct hustings, and B, Brexit will impact. If you missed the first 90 minutes of the programme, then I would urge you actually to get the podcast, because it is now, I think even Liam Fox, believe it or not, is feeling the nibble of reality upon his buttocks. Reality is beginning to bite. I think, as you know, that Theresa May put Liam Fox, Boris Johnson and David Davis in their jobs in order to force them to confront reality. I.e., eventually they'd have to turn around and say, actually, we cannot do, for various reasons, including gravity, we cannot do the things that we said we would be able to do. We didn't know, we didn't understand. Liam Fox hasn't actually admitted an error yet. He's just started saying things that are true and stopped saying things that have turned out not to be true. For example, we can only have frictionless trade from within the single market. And the department, I think part of the reason why Liam Fox has had to do this in public is because if you follow the Department of International Trade, then their releases recently, particularly actually in the last week or so, have made very, very sobering reading. I mean, we can joke about having done a deal with the Faroe Islands, but when you look at the stuff that people like Brandon Lewis, the chairman of the Conservative Party, and James Cleverly, a Brexit minister, have been tweeting, they've been tweeting government press releases encouraging you to celebrate the rolling over of deals, or the so-called rolling over of deals with countries like Switzerland, Norway and Iceland. But when you actually read what the Department of International Trade says about these so-called deals, they are billions and billions of pounds inferior to what we currently have. But it's too late. It's too late for Liam Fox to admit the truth. And of course, Boris Johnson and David Davis resigned, I think because they were beginning to recognise reality, and they resigned so that they could continue to pretend not to. Culminating in Boris Johnson standing up in Northern Ireland today. Oh, let's find out from Theo Usherwood what's been happening. Although Theo, I should add, is in Strasbourg, so we'll probably have to talk a little bit about Farage's ludicrous publicity stunt. Can we start with the proper politics, Theo, and the unfolding hustings in Northern Ireland this afternoon?
We can do, James. It actually does link to what I've been speaking to in terms of the MEPs here in Strasbourg. I was having a chat with Sophie in 't Veld, who is the Dutch MEP and deputy to Guy Verhofstadt, who is the chief Brexit negotiator for the European Parliament. And she told me there is no renegotiation to be done. They are not going to move on the backstop, and it is unrealistic of either of the Conservative leadership contenders, Boris Johnson or Jeremy Hunt, to pretend that there will be movement when it comes to reopening the withdrawal agreement. Now, of course, Sophie in 't Veld takes a much harder line than perhaps others might do behind the scenes, but there is no, from those I've spoken to away from the microphones here in Strasbourg, there is no negotiation to be had over the summer, and that's why Liam Fox out in support for Jeremy Hunt. There is some plausibility in what Mr. Hunt is saying in terms of extending beyond October the 31st in order to get something better, but the same questions remain about whether his party will allow him to do that, because of course the new president of the European Commission doesn't take that post until November the 1st. But Boris Johnson's plan, the idea that there could be some renegotiation in August, and if there isn't, then we're going to leave whatever on October the 31st, simply isn't workable from the European Union point of view. Nobody here that I've spoken to in Brussels has said, yeah, this is something we're prepared to work with.
And not just the people you describe as having quite a hard line on it, the Dutch MEP you mentioned, but is there nobody in the corridors in the background saying, yeah, obviously this is what's being said in public, but obviously, you know, there's a bit of room?
So the phrase that's used here in Brussels is keyhole surgery to the withdrawal agreement, and there might be some movement in terms of trying to change the withdrawal agreement in small, minute parts. But there is also frustration, actually, from those I was speaking to last night before starting work today, about what happened when Geoffrey Cox back in the spring came out and said, actually, the legal position hasn't changed, because that was the big move from the European Union's point of view, that if the UK found itself still in the backstop but could prove that the European Union hadn't, what the term they used best endeavours to try and find a way around the backstop, then we could take the European Union to court. That was the big move, and of course Geoffrey Cox said the legal position hadn't in fact changed, and therefore the DUP didn't come on board. It was that very dramatic morning. The DUP didn't come on board, and then Conservative Brexiter MPs didn't come on board, and then of course Theresa May failed to get her meaningful vote 2 at that stage through the House of Commons.
2 was the one the ERG didn't vote for. 3 was the one that they did vote for. No, which way round was it?
No. I mean,
the other way round.
The one that got the closest was the 34 rebels,
yes,
Conservative rebels, which was a chunk of the ERG, the so-called Spartans.
Lord, Theo, I'm going to pause you because we're going to run out of time. What's happened in Northern Ireland today? What have Hunt and Johnson said? Anything substantive, interesting on you?
No, nothing that they've said. I mean, everything. I mean, we talk about what Sophie Interveld said, and they're still carrying on with their same lines. Boris Johnson still thinks that he can find technological solutions, as does Jeremy Hunt. The only difference, as I said, is to point out to is that Jeremy Hunt is trying to buy himself more time beyond October the 31st, and he thinks that a solution can be found. Interestingly, Boris Johnson is having a meeting, and Jeremy Hunt's having a meeting with the DUP later, because of course their deal with Theresa May expired on June the 30th to extend the confidence and supply arrangement which is necessary for when Theresa May goes to the palace on July the 23rd, so she can at least tell the Queen that whoever wins can command a majority in the House of Commons, because unless the DUP sign up to that extension, then they won't. Then either candidate won't have a majority in the House of Commons.
Tell the nice listeners why I can hear "I Got You, Babe" playing in the background, Theo.
Can you?
Oh.
Well, sorry.
No, we've
sorry,
done,
have I missed a joke?
We've done this before. Remember, it's the opening scene of Groundhog Day.
Oh, sorry. You do this switch.
I know, it's just not fair, is it? Well, thank you, Theo Ashwood, LBC's political editor, live from Strasbourg. That manly bellow that you may have picked up in the background, I don't know how high his microphone settings were, belongs to not Sheila Fogarty, I hasten to add, but Ian Payne.